everyone. This is John Daly. I'm here again with Bernie Goldberg for another episode of the No BS Zone. How's it going today, Bernie?
So far, so good. How about you, John?
I'm doing all right. So both parties, their national conventions are now over. The election is a little over 2 months away. So today we are going to talk about how things stand as of right now. Kamala Harris, I think it's safe to say, is the front runner at the moment by a narrow margin. But there was an interesting, albeit probably not surprising development late last week when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Ended his presidential campaign and publicly endorsed Donald Trump. Recent polls had Kennedy around 3% nationally, which I think there were some variations in some of the swing state polling. Bernie, do you think that this endorsement in a race that's still quite close will help or hurt Donald Trump?
The short answer, the honest answer, is nobody knows. Before he was at 3%, he was at a much higher percentage, John. And the people who abandoned him, that got it down to 3%, I think are mostly Democrats who went home to the Democratic Party and will vote for Kamala Harris. But of the voters that remain, they're largely Trump voters. And if even if he gets 1% of the vote in a tight race in crucial battleground states, that could make a big difference. That could throw a state to Donald Trump, even if it's only 1%. But I want to throw out one other thing. Donald Trump not only has to defend what I'll call his craziness, the crazy things he says and does, but now he's going to have to also carry RFK Jr.'s baggage. That may turn out to be a minus for Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't, until you said that, I wasn't really thinking that the Kennedy endorsement could hurt Trump. I figured it could only help, if even just a little bit. I haven't written a whole lot about Kennedy, but my personal thoughts on the guy are not very positive ones. I think he's a man of very low character. I would encourage people to look up his treatment of women over the years. Kind of makes like Donald Trump look like a priest, or I shouldn't even say that, but makes him look like he's got the moral high ground there. But Kennedy's also a conspiracy nut, anti-vaxxer at virtually every level. Bernie, what gets me is that he has a strange relationship with animals, including dead ones, which he has. We've learned he's staged some crime scenes with. He's decapitated some on occasion. But while I argue,
Donald Trump has to defend all that. If Donald Trump defend all that along with Donald Trump's own craziness,
yeah,
that's a plus. But
and I barely scratched the surface there. So no, I'm not. I just, at this point, 3%, if that's what he's truly getting, that can make a difference, I think. I'm not convinced all of that 3% will collectively support Trump just based on Kennedy's endorsement. It wasn't all that long ago that Kennedy said some pretty rough things about Trump. He called him a terrible human being. He said he was the worst president ever. He said he was barely human, that he's probably a sociopath. These are all actual quotes. So I suspect that a number of people who have held on to Kennedy this long probably aren't going to now decide they're gonna throw in with Trump because of Kennedy's endorsement. But I did notice, Bernie. So one thing, it's Kennedy did more than endorse Trump. Kennedy's actually been telling people that he's been working with Trump as on serving a role in the next Trump administration. Doesn't that even make it harder for Trump to defend this baggage?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I said earlier, if even 1%, I'm not suggesting that the 3 or 5% that are still with RFK Jr. are going to all go to Donald Trump, but even if 1% go to him, that could make a difference. And let's consider one more thing. A lot of those voters are going to sit home on election day. And if you throw in what you just mentioned, that in exchange for the endorsement, he's going to be part of the Trump administration. I mean, I could see this being a net minus before this is over with.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. I hadn't really thought about that part of it. So switching gears, Bernie, what do you think, taking a step back, what do you think will ultimately decide the 2024 presidential election? And what do you think Trump needs to happen in order for him to come from behind and pull off a victory in November?
I'm going to keep this simple. If it's about issues, Trump has a good chance of winning. If it's about personalities, Trump has a good chance of losing. I mean, I think it's that simple. What he has to do to turn things around, what he has to do, I'm not sure he's capable of doing. He has to change his behavior. The insults don't work. The name calling doesn't work. If he continues down that road, I'm not making any predictions. As I've said many times, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or in October. I don't know what surprise is going to pop up. But if he continues down the road he's going, he likely will lose. So he has to change his behavior. Whether he's capable of it or not is another question. Personally, I don't think he is capable of changing his behavior.
No, you've been giving Trump some good advice, including just now about, toning down the insults and the other nastiness and sticking to the issues, where on the issues he pulls better on some big ones than Harris does. And there, to be fair, there have been some examples of him pulling back a little bit, but it usually only lasts for a few days before he then ultimately regresses back to himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it seems he really can't behave, like an adult for an extended period of time. And I think being the underdog now, it's not just the polls. He's seen some of these the people the crowds that Harris is generating, that's getting him fired up too. He's doing things that sort of come off as desperate at this point. I wrote a little bit about that in a column over the weekend, but I don't think anybody's really, even when he does try to do what you say, Bertie, at this point, like it's so short lived. I just don't think anybody's buying it, and I don't think at this point there's really anything he can do now to better position himself going into November. I think he has to count on Harris self-imploding somehow, maybe at the upcoming debate,
Exactly.
or her campaign making some big mistakes, or perhaps some big unexpected event. I think you brought up the possibility, like a terrorist attack that might change things, or some sort of economic catastrophe worse than just the high inflation we've seen. That stuff could certainly happen. Any of those things, I hope not, just for the sake of the country. But yeah, speaking of the debate, Bernie, the first one's coming up pretty soon. I think in just a couple of weeks. How important do you think that's going to be in this race?
I think it's the single most important thing in the political election season at this point, anyway. The big question, though, John, is there even going to be a debate? Trump is unhappy with ABC and may back out. But if there is a debate, he won't be debating a feeble Joe Biden. He'll be debating a Kamala Harris who's got her act together. Whether she can answer questions without going word salad on everybody, that remains to be seen. But here's my take. If he backs out, no matter what the reason, he will be seen as a coward, that it will look like he's afraid of Kamala Harris, and that will be crucially bad for Donald Trump. But let's say there is a debate, even one debate. If Trump doesn't behave during the debate, if she gets under his skin and he starts calling her names or insulting her, he will lose the debate, and likely he will lose the election. I know you want to weigh in on this, but before we go after that, I want to say one thing about the upcoming interview that she's going to grant to somebody or other. Okay, I just want to weigh in on that. I know that's not part of what we discussed, but let's do that before we go. You want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, no matter who she sits down with, I think she should sit down with Bill O'Reilly, actually. People
Right.
like him. No, seriously, people like him, people don't like him, but he is smart and he is a good interviewer. But anybody else, whether it's somebody on 60 Minutes, Scott Pelley or something, one interview isn't going to do it. What is that going to tell me? That she rehearsed all around? she needs to do a news conference, and she needs to be peppered with questions from all sorts of reporters, from all sorts of newspapers and broadcast and all sorts of outlets other than print, because then she may get serious questions from serious journalists, even if they're liberal journalists. But whoever she sits down with, one person, that's not going to satisfy me. And I don't think it's going to satisfy a lot of her critics. But you know what? A Bill O'Reilly interview would be pretty interesting, I think.
I think it would be entertaining. I think there's about zero chance of something like that happening. You probably agree with that.
Less than zero.
Yeah, yeah. But no, I do agree she does need to do interviews with somebody. You know, depending on who it is, that person will be accused of throwing her softballs, and that person may throw her softballs. But you know, but no, I think she hasn't done this so far, and I think it's worked for her not to do this, which is why it's the case. You know, she hasn't had to answer tough questions. She hasn't had these press conferences. For the sake of the country, she should be doing these things. People need to learn more about her. People need to learn more about, you know, how she feels these questions, what she thinks on various issues. But no, I definitely think that needs to happen.
By the way, John, I'm not saying that whoever she does the interview with is going to toss her softballs, because the reputation, excuse me, the reputation and the integrity of that reporter will be on the line for everybody to see. So I'm not expecting softballs. What I am saying is just one person has one perspective. She needs to get in front of a wide array of journalists. That's my point. A news conference will satisfy me. A one interview sit down, unless it's with somebody like O'Reilly or somebody else I'm not thinking about right now, no matter how good they are, I don't think will be enough.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think, but it's interesting though. You said that won't satisfy, but but people like you, for example, aren't going to vote for Harris regardless of how she does. Correct. So that might be what the campaign is sort of factoring in. There's such a relatively small number of persuadable voters at this point. They might not feel the need to engage in these things. Does that make sense?
That's a crucial point you just made. And I'm writing a column about that very point. I don't know if I'll publish it or not, we'll see. But I've made notes about that very point. The undecided voters, how could you be undecided this late in the game? You can't be the sharpest knife in the drawer at this. If you're undecided between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, I mean, no matter what you think of them personally, they're very different people. So you're the kind of voter who will be most persuadable by fake information, by false information, by word salad answers that you don't think are word salad answers because you're not that smart. No offense to undecided voters who may be listening to us. I don't think there are many. So you're right. Whoever she sits down with and does an interview with, the broad audience has already made up its mind. That sliver that remains may be subject to her answers that may not be honest answers, may be exaggerations, may be misstatements, or maybe outright lies, and they won't even know it. They won't even know it unless the reporter says, that's not a true statement. And getting that information correct in real time is not easy. So the broad audience has already made up its mind. They'll be watching just to watch. The sliver presumably will be watching because they're undecided.
Yeah, I will throw in, as you're working on that column.
Do very well with them.
What's that?
You may do very well with the undecideds.
Right. No, I think, and you brought up the intelligence factor. That's certainly, I think, part of it. I would say too, and I've talked to people, just friends of mine, about, I'm not one of those guys who brings up politics, but if other people do, when I'm outside of my commentary world, I'll weigh in. But I know a number of people who are, very smart people, And I am sort of shocked by how little they know about what's going on in politics, and it really is sort of tied to how busy they are in their lives and their professions, in with their families, taking on a lot of stuff. And I just, I'll bring up something that I thought everybody had heard about, and it's news to them. So I think those are also part of the persuadable voters at this point. But yeah, it's I would say just not very engaged in some cases. But just another group of people I thought I should worth mentioning.
So here's my point about those people, if they're undecided and other undecideds. If she comes across as likable, which I have said many times is one of the most powerful forces in the universe, likability, and Trump comes off as not likable, it doesn't matter what her answers are. It doesn't matter if she sits down with somebody and gives true answers or false answers. If she comes up as likable to people who are still undecided this late in the game, that may be more important than giving good answers to questions. And by the way, if you want to weigh in on the debate, please do.
Yeah. So I do think that Trump will probably stick with the debate and do it. I think a lot of people will tune in, as they did with the Biden-Trump debate, which ended up, I think, being one of the most consequential presidential debates in U.S. history. It got Biden out of the race.
Exactly.
I don't think Trump is a good debater. I never have. The only debate I think he's ever won against, at least against a Democratic opponent, was that last one, and that's because Biden's brain was fried. And so, that said, the last time we saw Kamala Harris debate, she wasn't very good, either. I suspect both will do better than they previously have. I think both campaigns understand the stakes and that they'll try their best to prepare their candidates. I think the best thing Trump can do is keep Harris linked tightly to the problems of the Biden administration over the last 4 years, which obviously makes sense. She's the vice president, although one would argue vice presidents usually aren't involved in much. But Trump can point out that a lot of things were better under him, at least during those first 3 years. After that, things changed. But for Harris, who has been, I think, doing an effective job with the help of the media of separating herself from Biden's baggage, I think she has to keep, like you say, there's something to be said about the personality factor. She's been showing this joyful attitude. They're always talking about joy in this campaign. I think I could see her. You mentioned her getting under Trump's skin. I think if she can set herself up where she's sort of laughing off some of his attacks on stage, that's going to form a real a difference there in people's mind, where he's going nasty and she's sort of blowing him off like he's not serious. I think that would be the best thing. I mean, not when I say laugh off, I don't mean like cackle off, but just sort of, because the cackle, she's kept it under control a bit. But I think she needs, in addition to come prepared to explain a lot of her recent flip-flops, I think she needs to keep talking up America. Trump always presses the theme, at least when he's out of power, that America basically is crap, without him in charge of things. And Harris's campaign has actually done a good job of coming in from a different angle and painting this converse picture. Lots of flag waving we saw at the convention. A lot of talk about freedom, even if those themes may not well represent some of the prevailing sentiment and policies in the Democratic Party, but they seem to have sort of co-opted that away from what we used to see in Republican campaigns. Bernie, have you been surprised by how much, at least stylistically, that the Harris campaign looks and sounds like a traditional Republican campaign from the pre-Trump era?
I think it's a brilliant strategy. Brilliant. They're running a flawless campaign. Now, how long that will last, we'll find out soon enough. But so far, as we speak today, John, they've run a flawless campaign. She speaks in platitudes. She smiles. She talks about, the future versus Donald Trump's talking about the past. She's upbeat. And I'll end with something I said earlier. It's about the debate, but it goes beyond the debate. If he continues to insult her, whether it's at the debate or on the campaign trail, he will lose the debate, and I think likely lose the election, because I think for the undecided voters, issues may be important, but I don't think they're as important as how the two candidates come across. And that will, I think, for undecided voters, for low information voters, mean more than whose foreign policy is better. But I want to go back to what you asked me. I think the Harris campaign is running a magnificent campaign against Donald Trump, and I don't think he's handled it very well.
So yeah, and I agree with all of what you just said. So Bernie, I wanted to sort of wrap things up today with a little BernardGoldberg.com housekeeping. We had a little bit of an issue lately with some subscribers believing that columns that I've written for the website were instead written by you. This has resulted in you, in some cases, receiving undue credit for my work. And in other cases, Bernie, you've received undue scorn and even charges of hypocrisy for being a flip-flopper because some of my positions aren't consistent with some of your positions. One commenter even accused you, Bernie, of being two-faced. And the reality, of course, is that there literally are two faces behind the columns on this website.
Mine and yours.
Fine. So I just wanted to advise people that when you're reading a column, when it shows up in your email, to pay close attention to the byline and the profile picture at the top of each column to avoid confusion.
Don't give me credit for John Daly's brilliance. And John, stop. Put your hands over your ears for a second, and don't blame me for the dopey things he says either.
Okay, I wasn't listening. Sorry. No. But also, it's funny. In some of these rants that you received, Bernie, on because of me. There was one fellow who kept saying that who's been insisting, a new subscriber, that you are actually an undercover liberal and that you love Kamala. And so I was wondering if you'd like to take this opportunity to address that.
Yeah, I think you should go back to your meds, subscriber, and take a nap. And when you wake up, if you have time, read just about anything I've written and tell me where you found one column, one sentence, one syllable where I've said Kamala Harris is somebody I would vote for, because you can't. Now, I know I just said that her campaign is a brilliant campaign, but she's not running the campaign. Her political people are. But I have never said anything about Kamala Harris that could even vaguely be considered positive. So no, I'm not voting for Kamala Harris. And for those who are new to the game, I'm not voting for Donald Trump either. I didn't in 2016. I didn't in 2020. And I'm not this time because I find him unfit for office and I find her unfit for different reasons. I know I'll be accused of, if somebody has already said, if you don't vote, you can't comment on the election, you can't complain. Oh, yes, I can. I have a right to vote and I have a right to complain. I'm choosing not to use my right to vote, but I am using my right to complain. And I will continue to complain even if I don't vote. And I won't vote.
Very well said. So we'll go ahead and close things out today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us as usual. Bernie, anything you'd like to say before we wrap it all up?
Yeah, it was brilliant on my part to insult new subscribers. No offense. All I'm saying is what you get is what you see is what you get. You may agree with me or you may disagree with me, but I'm never going to pander to you. I don't do that. I leave that to cable news to pander to their audience. All you get is my honest opinion. You can disagree with it. That's fine. You may even be right, and I may even turn out to be wrong. But I'm never going to pander to you. I have more respect for you than to do that.
That's right. That's right. Subscribers should know what they're in store for when they come here, and that was a good representation. So, Bernie, thanks a lot, and you have a great day. All right.
You too, John.